Good morning, everybody. It is about 8:21 in the morning. I am still very, very sleepy. I had some really weird dreams last night, and it was very hard for me to fully fall back asleep, I think, sometimes. And a lot of dreams where they kind of flowed together, like they were all kind of in the same space, but it was almost like they were separate episodes of a season, which was really weird. Like, they all involved the same people. They just had, like, different things happen in, like, each time I fell back asleep. At the end of last week's video, I said I was going to try to finish Fire and Blood yesterday because I only had about 45 pages, and that did not happen because I ended up sitting instead and editing a lot of last week's vlog and then having dinner, and then I also ended up sitting with Robert before he went off to work last night, so I didn't get much more reading done yesterday, but I did get through a good chunk of the book. 48 pages of the book, which is not too bad. It's honestly like what my average is, I think, for how long my attention span with this book can usually last, because there's usually a lot of stuff going on. I'm gonna try to finish that today. I've got about, like I said, 45 pages, I think, of that or something, and then I will get through With the Fire on High. My goal for today with my new kind of reading schedule thing I've got going on is that I want to try to get through about half of this, and then also this week I do want to end up getting through Wicked Saints, and then I think even The Black Witch by the end of the week, and then over the weekend reading probably the last two books I have on this TBR, which are The End of Oz and Break Your Glass Slippers, because those are fairly short, so I think I could get those both done like on Saturday, since I don't have anything I'm doing on Saturday. So I think it might be a pretty productive reading week, which I'm really hoping for. Right now in the state of Michigan, if you'd like to continue hearing my virus updates that are going on in the state of Michigan, there's a lot of grocery stores that are starting to enact this thing where you can only have, like, I think it's 5 people per 1,000 square feet of the building. And then my sister had said that at the store she started working at here a couple weeks ago, they ended up actually putting up these like plexiglass, not like cages, but like boxes basically around the cashier stands, because it's a better way for them to stay protected. And there's like a little slot where they can slide their money through. I'm still super busy with that huge project I've been working on for the last couple weeks. We're getting to like the tail end of it though, because we've already passed, like, I think 250 documents left that we have to give titles and descriptions for. So I think that I'm getting to a point where that's going to be done hopefully this week, maybe beginning of next week. I'm gonna get started with my day, and I'll let you guys know once I finish Fire and Blood. I should be able to finish this, I think, by the end of the day, with my current pattern of being able to read about 40 pages or so of the book over the course of my ergonomic breaks.
Like a bird on a tree, I'm just sitting.
Hey guys, so it's about 12:30 in the afternoon now. I've just finished my lunch and also finally finished Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. So I think I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5 stars because I really liked the idea of this book. I think that it was really cool to kind of have this almost historical based text that essentially outlined the Targaryen bloodline from when Aegon I conquered Westeros and how the Targaryens for the next nearly 300 years had ruled Westeros before Robert Baratheon had taken over. This book actually ends up going only though until about halfway through the 2nd century. So we're about halfway done, I think, with the whole story. We basically leave off with Aegon III on his 16th birthday when he is getting ready to take over Westeros for the first time. He is considered to be the Broken King because a lot of things happened to him in his childhood that kind of made him so that he was kind of cold-hearted. He didn't really talk to people. He didn't want to do really anything. So I'm interested to see how he actually ends up ruling in the 2nd volume of this, because based on what we know of Aegon III, he was not very involved with a lot of stuff, and it wasn't until he got to the point where he was able to start ruling that he actually had any kind of interest in anything. So I'm interested to see how that continues. And then, like I said, the rest of the Targaryen line is probably going to be involved in that 2nd volume, because this is the first book in this series of historical text. I don't know exactly what you would want to call it. My issue with it though was that, similar to how I felt with the Song of Ice and Fire series, just the language was really hard for me sometimes to grasp, and I felt that I was skimming a lot of the material because I felt that I was getting really distracted with some of this stuff. Like, there were just some things that I feel like were touched on that didn't necessarily need to be known, but this is a pretty comprehensive account of what this world had become from the time of Aegon's conquest. If you're really interested in things like history, and you're especially interested in history dealing with fantasy worlds that you want to know more about and want to understand, I think, a little more about how the kingdom kind of came to be where it is, with some of the traditions and some of the different things about the Targaryen bloodline specifically, I would highly recommend this, especially if you are a huge fan of the Song of Ice and Fire books, because I think this is a really interesting look at how exactly the Targaryens kind of rose to power, and a lot of the issues that they had come around that essentially lead to what we know of with the kingdom at the point of the Song of Ice and Fire series. However, I think if you are more of a fan of the TV show and you are not really that interested in like super comprehensive history of worlds of that nature, I wouldn't pick this up, because I don't think it's going to do anything for you. I think that this is very much a kind of book that is meant for the people that are so very, very interested and very involved with knowing about the world and knowing about the history. But if you're a fan of the TV show, you're not really missing much. I mean, it is interesting to see how this whole thing kind of sets up the real world that we see in the TV show and in the books, but it's not necessarily needed. Like, you don't have to read this book to understand what happens in the Song of Ice and Fire books or in the Game of Thrones TV show. So like I said, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm really glad I actually took my time with this one, because I think if I was to have tried to read this in the entire week of Anathon, I would have liked this so much less. I feel like it's one of those things you have to really take your time with, because you're learning so much information in 710 pages essentially, that it can get a little much to try to read all within like a few days. So definitely take your time with this if you're a big fan, because I think you'll get much more out of it. But yeah, so I read about 45 pages of this to end off my reading of it, so I'm so excited I finally finished this. So I do still have to work for the rest of the day. I've got about less than 3.5 hours of work before my day ends, and I've got quite a bit of work to do. But for the rest of the day and during the rest of my ergonomic breaks, I will be reading With the Fire on High, which, by the way, the naked hardcover of this book is so stunning. I think that this is so cool, and I'm really excited to read this one. This is for owls, obviously. Now, this one is for my arithmancy course, which is to read a book that is outside of my favorite genre. And as I said before, my favorite genre is fantasy, and contemporary is basically the other end of that spectrum. So I thought this would be really good. And I really liked The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo when I read it last year in 2019 during Blackathon, I think it was, when I was participating in that readathon. My goal is that I am going to get to about page 196, which is essentially the start of a chapter. So I'll have read about 195 pages of this, and then tomorrow I should be finishing the second half of this book, and then probably moving on to Wicked Saints on Wednesday. So this is, I think, very attainable, because this book is, I think, another contemporary where I've heard it is very quick to move through, just like how The Poet X was.
I got time, it's clear to see from up here the world seems small.
Okay, so it's about 4:30 right now. I actually finished work about half an hour ago, and I spent the last half hour essentially finishing up last week's vlog. Today I did also get through the first 41 pages of With the Fire on High. I am liking it so far. I'm a little too new to it to really give any kind of thoughts on it, but what I will say is that this basically is following a high school senior named Imani. I think she's a mix of Latina and Black. If I'm not mistaken, I do believe that Elizabeth Acevedo, in both this book and in The Poet X, basically wrote an own voices character that was also Latina and Black. All I've gotten so far, though, is the Latina aspect in this one, but I don't know for sure if she is African American as well. This is following Imani, who is a teen mom. She got pregnant about her freshman year of high school with this guy named Tyrone, and Tyrone seems to be kind of a jerk jerk. Like, we haven't really met him as of yet, but the way that Imani talks about him is that he's not really that nice of a guy, or he doesn't seem to really care. But basically, Imani is a lover of cooking. She loves anything to do with food and cooking because it's a huge thing within her family, and on top of it, it is something that she's always loved doing just in general. It's kind of her creative space. It's kind of where she feels the most comfortable, and she always takes these recipes that are like so well known to so many different kinds of people, but puts her own spin on it by adding certain spices or changing up certain ingredients, things of that nature. And all I've really gotten to at this point is that essentially in her senior year, when it first starts up, she's given the ability to possibly take a culinary class as an elective, and that's not really heard of in her school. They kind of cut away the culinary arts part of the education system in her school for one reason or another, but they're deciding to bring it back, and that leaves a little bit of hesitation for her because Imani is really trying to focus on finishing school and being able to do well so that she can go to college and stuff like that, I believe. But she does also want to take this culinary arts class because it's something she's really into and she thinks she'd be really good at it. And there's also an ability for her to travel to Spain, as the culinary class is focused in Spanish foods, and the class actually gets to go to Spain for like a study abroad trip of sorts. So she really wants to do it, but she's kind of hesitant to, and that's really all I've gotten to so far. Other than that, we don't really know much other than the fact that she is being raised by her grandmother. She's been raised by her grandmother pretty much her whole life due to unseen circumstances that we haven't really gone into. And her daughter, who is named Emma, but she calls baby girl, she is about 2 years old, and I think she's so endearing. I already love the relationship that Imani and Emma have, because Imani is like one of those women where like she just exudes motherly energy, and you can't help but smile at the way that she interacts with her child, and it just makes me so happy because I think that's kind of how I would be with my own kid. Like, I would really be super involved and super loving and be all up with them about what they're doing and all these things, and I just feel like I get such a good motherly vibe from Imani. I think it had come from a lot of strife though, because obviously being such a very young mother, there's a lot of things that go into that, and then being raised by her grandmother who is on disability and is not, as able to take care of both Imani and Emma as maybe Imani's mother would, it's very difficult. And so Imani is trying to kind of help her grandmother because she's helped her with raising this kid of hers without wanting to or without asking to. So I really like the abuela though. I think she is so funny and very witty, and she reminds me a lot of my grandmother, which is hilarious because my grandmother is one of those people who will get after me about stuff, but all with love, kind of thing. I don't know, I have some really good feelings for this, and I feel like this is going to be one of those books where the family dynamics are going to be a really big part of the story and are going to make me love this so much more. And I think especially with hopefully seeing more of Imani and Emma's relationship over the course of the book, I'm really thinking this is going to be something I'm going to end up loving with all of my heart. And even though, like I said, with Tell Me Three Things, I don't think that YA is necessarily my area of reading anymore that I'm interested in, I think that there's an exception. I think that essentially what I felt with Tell Me Three Things is that was more focused on like romantic aspects, whereas with The Fire on High is more focused on like coming of age, more, not darker topics necessarily, but more realistic based topics like being a teen mom and having to traverse that. I think that part of YA I still am very invested in because I love seeing those kinds of stories develop. I just don't think that YA romantic stories are what I think I may be into anymore, because they just don't seem realistic anymore to me like they would have when I was like 16, 17 years old. So I am thinking this is probably going to be 5 stars by the end of it, but we'll see. I'm not going to count my chickens before they hatch as of yet. I will say this is also very fast to move through. The chapters are fairly short, and it's similar to with Tell Me Three Things. They're very easy to move through because the story itself is just very fast-paced, simple language. It's not too hard really to delve through it and get involved with it. It's just, it's very grounded in realism, so it's easier to fly through than it is like a fantasy story would. Hey guys, so sorry for my really messy hair. I just got out of the shower and have put a face mask on, but I needed to come on to say that we got the house. Oh my gosh. We were notified this evening about the house, and I'm
so excited. I'm so happy. I will talk properly more about this tomorrow, but I needed to say it that tonight we figured out we got the house. Oh my God.
We can sit together. It's so beautiful. You and me. We meant to be in the great outdoors.
Hey guys, so it is about 20 to 4 o'clock right now. I still have about 20 minutes really left of work, but I'm currently on an ergonomic break because I've been working for like the last hour and a half almost straight. I did only get to page 90 something, no, page 102 last night. So I read about 101 pages of With the Fire on High. Currently, my reading has been really good today. I'm now on page 262, so I've read already over 160 pages. I have still quite a bit of the book left. The book itself is 388 pages, so I still have like 126 pages left of this, but this is one of those books, again, like I said, that's very fast moving, and I'm falling in love with it. Like, this is, I think, one of my more favorite newer authors is Elizabeth Acevedo, because both of her books, which this is only her second one that she's released as of yet, they're both so amazing. Like, The Poet X touches so much on race and especially being biracial and having a lot of issues with trying to find yourself within both of those confines. And then The Poet X really delves a lot into also some of the kind of issues that the main character has with becoming a poet and wanting to go into that, because there's a lot of stigma against it with her mother, and a lot of the things that she writes are about things about her life and what she's experienced, and she's afraid that if her mother hears about it or her mother sees what she's writing, that it's going to affect the way her mother is, and she doesn't have a very good relationship, I think, in terms of what she would like with her mother. A lot of those things are also brought up in With the Fire on High, because the main character in this is also Latina and African American mixed, and a lot of her story is that she's having a hard time with trying to accept the fact that there's this other layer of her where she's a teen mother, and being a teen mother is incredibly difficult, especially because the only other family that she really has to help her with what she's going through is her grandmother, and her grandmother is, you know, only able to do so much. She's only able to help out so much because of her own standing. Imani is just really struggling with finding out what she needs to do for herself and to help with her child, because she knows her grandmother's not going to be around forever, and so she does have to step up in a lot of ways, more than she's already done as of now, to take care of her daughter Emma. But she also really wants to become a chef and own a restaurant and do well with that. And so, especially at her age, where she's a senior in high school, there's a lot of questioning about, you know, whether or not she should really go to college, whether or not she should kind of take a giant step and work in a restaurant and really make it her own. And a lot of the story is about finding out herself and really understanding who she is while she's a teen mother, because a lot of times, especially young mothers, like, they have a hard time, from what I've experienced with friends that have had children very young, that are like around my age and already are on maybe their second child. The idea of being a young mother is very daunting in a lot of ways, because Imani is struggling with not only really growing up, but growing up and having to take care of another person. And so a lot of her decisions are really, you know, not decisions that she's making for herself. They're decisions that she has to make for her daughter. And that can be really detrimental, because in a lot of ways, Imani is sacrificing so much of herself to take care of her daughter. And it's just incredibly heartbreaking, but I think also to the extent that it's understandable. Like, you really understand why she's struggling. You understand a lot of why this is so difficult for her to make these decisions, but she's really trying her best, and I really commend her for it, because there's so much love that she has for her daughter. On top of all that, though, she is dealing with the fact that she doesn't know who her mother was, because her mother seems to have died in childbirth. Her father is essentially non-existent, hasn't really been a part of her life, so she's not really had a lot of real foundation when it comes to raising a child or being like a parent, except for her grandmother. And on top of that, her baby daddy is really kind of not a good guy. He's kind of one of those guys where they're not together, but he doesn't like the idea of her going off and dating other guys because it's not him. And he kind of, it makes the double standard of, I can go out with a bunch of different girls with my daughter with me, but to have you have another guy
at any point interacting with my daughter that you're supposed to be dating. It's really frustrating, but this is unfortunately what a lot of young mothers especially have to deal with when they are not involved with the fathers of their children anymore, and they decide to live their own lives and start dating other people, is that they have to deal with a baby daddy essentially being like, you can't date this guy because he is not the father of your child. I am, but I am gonna go and date 5, 6 other girls, and you can't say anything about it. And there's so many layers to this that I think is so amazing, because they're things that are not talked about very often when it comes to young adult literature. And I love that authors like Elizabeth Acevedo are really bringing these things to the table and really talking about these things in different kinds of perspectives. Because if we were to look at this story from a white female perspective, the story would be entirely different. And to see so many of the different intricacies that are involved in this story, and so many of the different layers that are involved to Imani and what she's dealing with, and having to be a teen mother in a society today, it's so fascinating, but it's so very heartbreaking at the same time, that it is no wonder why Elizabeth Acevedo really wanted to write this kind of a story, because it is a story that needs to be told. It is something that needs to be addressed because it is not being addressed as of now. And to address these kinds of things a lot of times is considered taboo. But I love that there are so many authors now, like Elizabeth Acevedo, that are taking the steps to actually put these stories out in a way that is not too graphic or too taboo, but is something that's digestible, but is still so impactful in so many ways. Like, I can tell you right now, by the end of this, I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5 stars, because I love this book so much. I love Elizabeth Acevedo's writing. I really want to see her write more, and I really would love to see what else she has in store in terms of writing more contemporary stories. So in other news, like I said last night, Robert and I got approved for the house that we applied for last week. I'm so excited. I'm so happy, because with the stay-at-home thing, like many of us know, we were really worried that if we didn't get approved for this house, which is 5 minutes from my office, it was going to be very hard for us to even be able to figure out what to do, because we knew we would have to more than likely get another lease for our apartment, which we really didn't want to do, but we knew was probably going to happen if we didn't get approved. Now it's just preparing for the moving. So we have a few weeks before our lease goes up, but now the issue becomes really nothing that's necessarily in my control. It's something that is kind of more on the realtor, because she did email me saying that she's not sure if she can get a couple things figured out. Like, they want to get the carpets clean, they want to fix up a couple things in the house. I'm hoping that we can move in by the 1st. I did say that to her, that was kind of what we were hoping for, but it's really going to depend on what all she is able to do within the confines of the stay-at-home thing. So this kind of thing is very much out of my control. I understand that. It's nothing I can really do. The most that Robert and I can do now is just preparing with packing things up and getting things ready, so that when we are able to move, we can just move it all as soon as possible. And then that way it frees up a lot of my worries and a lot of my headspace that I have. So I've got lists upon lists going. I think I'm going to try to finish with The Fire on High, and then the rest of the night is we're going to finish the first season of Breaking Bad. We have 2 episodes left of that, and I'm kind of liking it so far. Not nearly as much as I liked Better Call Saul, but it's only the first season. Hey guys, so it is about 5:15 now, and I've officially finished with The Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is my OWLs pick for my arithmancy course, where I had to pick a book that was outside of my favorite genre being fantasy, and this is a contemporary. So as I said before, I loved this book, and even after reading the last 120 pages, I still love it. It's a 5 out of 5 stars for me, for all of the reasons that I stated earlier. I found the ending of this novel so very poignant and so very middle road like, because Imani has a very hard decision to make towards the end of the novel regarding exactly what she's going to do after high school, whether she's going to go to college or she's going to work, and how exactly she's going to take care of her daughter. The ending of it was really just middle of the road, and I think the best possible thing that I think could have happened for Imani in her position, I just found it to be not necessarily like rainbows and butterflies like we would want from a YA contemporary, but it was very realistic in some ways, and I think very much fit her character and the dynamic that she had built with her family in terms of what they were going to have to do to try to help her with what her decision was. And I think that one of my favorite parts of it was really the relationship that builds between Amani and Malachi. And I think that Malachi is kind of one of those guys where he isn't like other guys, as cliche as that may seem. He's very open, he's very aware of what Imani is going through, and he understands that there's a lot of things about her that he can't necessarily delve deep into right away. This is very much a relationship where it's still building as the story ends and is going to continue building. It's not something that is, full-fledged 6 feet deep in kind of thing immediately. It's one of those things where Imani puts him like at arm's distance, and slowly he starts to become closer, but not ever too close to where he knows absolutely everything about her, which I appreciate so much, because I think if this would have been one of those stories where Imani and Malachi's relationship were to have gone very, very deep very quickly, it would not have worked. There was a scene, I will say, that I think may have gone a little too fast for my liking if I was in Imani's position, but I am not Imani. I cannot make the same decisions as she would. 5 out of 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. I, again, am going to always recommend, I think, Elizabeth Acevedo to everyone, because I think that she gives me the same feelings that I felt when I first read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, where I felt so inspired and so like everything opened up for me in terms of understanding something that I didn't think I had much understanding on in general. And I think in general for this one, it was about being a teen mom. In The Poet X, it was about being a African-American Latino woman and being a creative individual when you're in a family that necessarily doesn't agree with those things, and they're very religion focused in a sense. And with The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, it was understanding really the real problem when it comes to police brutality and understanding how these things affect the African American communities, and being a white person not knowing much about those things, it was so eye-opening. And I think that Elizabeth Acevedo does the same exact thing, where she opened my eyes to seeing these different parts of life that I would never have known, because I've never been in those positions myself and I've never experienced those things myself. And so it's just so fascinating to read from both of these authors, because they hit on things that I think I never would have experienced, and I kind of in a sense experienced them. I will never understand fully to what both of these kinds of women have written on based on these characters, because there are people that are like Imani and that are like Star that have their own unique experiences that are echo the experiences of different people in the world, and I will never understand that. But to read something like this where I can get a glimpse of that, and I can understand what that glimpse signifies and what it does for me and what it tells me about this particular experience, it's very eye-opening. It makes me a little bit more appreciative of the different kinds of people that we have in our world. And it really just makes me think about how everyone comes from such a different walk of life, and it makes me feel more compassionate, I think, in terms of understanding that I am not the only person in the world. I do not have the same experience as everybody else, and everyone else in the world does not have the same experience that I do. My experience in my life is what I make it, and it comes from what I have currently within my life, and not everyone has that. And so it's something that really makes me think, and it makes me understand that I am not the center of the world. I never thought of that before in that way, that I was the center of the world and the center of everybody's world. My white experience is not the only experience there is in the world. I think I've learned even more that it is not that case by reading something like this. And I think it's so very, very important that we read things like this that push for that really make you understand that your perspective is not the only perspective in the world, and there are people like Imani and Starry that have very, very hard lives, and they have some things about themselves that are just like everybody else, but they come from different kinds of life that make things either harder or better for themselves than you personally have. So I don't have the physical book with me, it's in my backpack, and I don't really want to go out in the living room and grab it right now, but the next book I will be reading starting tomorrow is Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. Essentially, I've read 2 contemporary stories, and now now I'm jumping back into more of a fantasy one that I've heard is very dark. And I know that just today, the second book, Ruthless Gods, just came out. So I really hope I like this because it seems like it's going to be very much up my alley with kind of the gothic style of things that I've heard about this story. I heard that it can be very dark and it's very, blood-filled and gory. I've heard some people say that they've had some issues with it, and I'd have to look at their reviews again to see what those issues were after I read Wicked Saints, but I'm kind of excited because I just want to see what the whole deal with the story is. And then, like I said, Ruthless Gods just came out today, so if I like it enough, maybe after I move, we'll get the next book. I kind of have a small list going of some books that I'd like to purchase after I move, because now it's gonna be a little crazy here in the next couple weeks, so I'm not gonna really have the funds to go just buy a bunch of books again.
Forever free.
Good morning, guys. It is about 10:45 in the morning. I just got done doing a little bit of a break, and I'm gonna just take a couple more minutes to let you guys know how today's gone so far. So I've been working now for almost 3 hours, and it's been pretty okay. I'm kind of just still doing the same thing I've been doing, but we're getting to the end of that very large project that I had started a few weeks ago. So I hopefully should either finish it today or tomorrow, depending on what all happens. I also have Friday off this week, which I almost forgot about because this Friday is Good Friday, because this Sunday, I believe, is Easter. I just, though, during this last break, read through the entire first chapter of Wicked Saints. I'm kind of wrong, I think, in some regard. I mean, I only went through the first chapter, but the first place that we are in within this country is the monastery, which is not really on the coast. It's a little bit of a ways off of it. I'll show you guys kind of where it is on this map. If you look here, the monastery is about right here, and this is where the first chapter takes place. It's not far from the coast. It's still a good ways from it, though. I'm going to kind of count it because it's pretty close to it, but there is movement going on in this book because the very first chapter, essentially what happens is the main character, Nadia, she is a cleric at the monastery, and we find out that she is able to access the power of the gods in this world, which this whole world is very Russian-centered, like it's very Russian-inspired. I can tell just from the language of like the names of the places and the names of like the people. It just sounds very Russian, and I do believe I've heard people say that this was Russian-inspired. Essentially, Nadia is able to, in this world, there's like 20 different gods that her particular people aspire to please. She is able to somehow communicate with them and also draw on their power for different reasons. And unfortunately for her, there's this war that's going on in Travania, which is kind of like the ruling country, I guess, or the ruling portion of this landmass, and they come to the monastery to attack it. The crown prince essentially takes his soldiers and they go attack the monastery, and Nadia unfortunately is caught in the crosshairs of all of it. She's for some reason not really able to help much, despite the fact that she's able to use the powers of the gods, because she finds out that the crown prince is able to use a particular kind of blood magic that he has learned, because apparently in Travania there are other types of mages or magic like people. Essentially the whole first chapter is the monastery being ransacked, and Nadia at the very end of the chapter has to run off to try to protect herself, because apparently she is more important in terms of who she is and what she's able to do, that it's better for her to run off and stay safe than stay in the monastery and possibly die with all of her friends and the people that she's basically grown up with as an orphan there. Very, very interesting first chapter, but the thing is if for people who don't like being thrown in the literal middle of something that's happening, this is going to be something you might not like right away, because if you don't like stuff happening right in the middle of things, that's what happens. You are thrown into the middle of this actual start of the ransacking of the monastery with very little information, and as kind of things go on, naturally you start to learn different things. Like you learn about the fact that she's a cleric, you learn about the fact that she can control magic, she can contact the gods, and it's not very info dumpy. It's actually very natural. Like as things progress, you do learn things as the whole story goes on. Like you just kind of learn about it as you're reading what's exactly happening, as opposed to there being like major info dumpy aspects.
Hey guys, so it is Thursday. It's, I think, going on like 6, maybe like 5:45 or so, and I think I'm gonna get up and make dinner soon. But wanted to sit and talk to you guys for a second just because something's been kind of going through my head a little bit in the last few hours. I'm feeling kind of hazy today, and I don't know what it is. By the way, I'm on page 231 of Wicked Saint. So far, so good. I do like it quite a bit. It's just not as dark as I thought it was going to be for some reason. I was expecting it to be a lot gorier and a lot darker, but it hasn't quite hit that point. But I'm still only like just over halfway through it, so I've still got quite a bit of book to read. No, I've been feeling really hazy today, and I don't know exactly why. I have days like this where, you know, I'll have like a really good stretch of days for like maybe 3, 4, 5 days depending, and then I hit a day where I just feel very hazy. Like, it's not necessarily like derealization or like a depersonalization kind of scenario. It's just one of those things where like I have a day where like I'm either like really exhausted or my brain isn't necessarily working the way it should, and I just feel like a mix of sad, mixed with tired, and I don't know, like something else, but I can't really put my finger on it. But it's like a mix of 3 things really, and it'll usually only happens for maybe a day, 2 days at the most, but it's something that's really difficult for me. And I want you guys to know that, especially during this time where we're in these kind of spots where we're told to stay at home, we can't really go out and do a whole heck of a lot, and we can't really see a lot of people on a regular basis like most of us are used to. It's okay to have these kinds of days where you're just kind of sad for no reason. I have a lot of days where I'm just really sad for not any particular reason, even when I was, you know, just going about my normal routine. And I think that right now, especially with this quarantine stuff, people are starting to understand that these days are days that most people with anxiety and depression have. And to feel upset and feel sad because you can't do some things, like that's something that some people live with every single day of their lives. And it's okay. Like, you're allowed to have those days. You're allowed to understand that your mental health is not, you know, static. Your mental health is going to fluctuate every single day, every hour, because of what you experience. And I think that like right now I'm understanding that a lot more, because I am understanding more of the fact that because I'm home, I'm not necessarily sad of anything. It's just I'm having a bad day. Or if I am upset about something and there is a particular reason, I'm able to pinpoint that a lot easier now than I was when I was having a normal routine of going to work every day and coming home afterward and having, you know, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my night, since I only have, you know, a few hours of my day left before I have to go to bed to make sure I get enough sleep at night to then wake up the next morning and do it all again. Today, it's just one of those days where I don't really know what's going on. Everything's been fine. Everything's been actually really great since I think we've been approved for the house. It's just now a waiting game of figuring out what exactly the realtor still needs to have figured out to like get the house ready for us to move in. It's just a day where I'm feeling kind of run down, and I think in general it may just be that I'm tired. It may just be that I'm done with the week, to be honest. Like, today is my last day for this week. Tomorrow on Friday is Good Friday and I am taking PTO. But I think that my body and my brain are just like, oh, we're finally done for the week. We're tired. You know, it's been a really exhausting week in terms of my work week, and it's been a very also hectic few weeks with work. And I think that's part of it too, is that I finally finished that huge project I've been working on for now nearly a month, and I just think that finally being done with that, my brain is just tired and done. Like, I just didn't want to do much after I finished that, but I still had a whole work day ahead of me when I finished those. So I think that tonight is just going to be a night where I sit and read. I want to still finish Wicked Saint. I think I have like 150 pages of it left, and today's just a day where like normally I would sit and watch a TV show with Robert. Like right now we're watching Breaking Bad, but I'm not really in the mood for that. I really don't want to do anything. I just want to lay around and not do much tonight. I don't even really want to cook dinner, but I think I'm going to, because Robert is not awake at the moment and he's not going to be getting up until like 6:30. So I think I'm just going to take a break from Wicked Saints at the moment, and I'm going to go and make dinner and at least get something in my stomach, because maybe too part of the reason why I'm sad is because I'm hungry, and see if that helps. And if not, then I'm just, you know, tired. I'm just sad because of things, and maybe it's just I'm tired because of the work week.
I sometimes you need to go and take a step back to see the truth.
All right, let's talk about the book. What are my thoughts on this book? Some good and some bad. I don't think I liked this book nearly as much as I wanted to. I think I set way too high expectations for this than I had gotten out of it. I will say it's a solid 3-star. I did enjoy it when I was going through the story. I did really like what the story had going for it. I am excited to read Ruthless Gods because the end of this book essentially did leave us on a point of real contention, which makes the second book easier for me to understand kind of where the plot might be going. But here are a couple of my big issues with this. For one, the romantic involvement that is between one of the main characters, Nadia, and another character, Malachi, I do not think works because I just, from the very beginning, didn't really like them together. I felt that Malachi was just so far out of Nadia's realm. Like, he basically is a part of the people that took her family and basically destroyed her only life she's ever known. Now, she doesn't know exactly what he is until later in the story, but the fact that he is of the same, essentially, race of sorts as the people that had attacked her monastery in the very beginning of the book, she automatically, associates them with him. But understanding that not everyone of the same race is of the same mindset and things of that nature, I understand her willingness to be a little bit more open, but he kind of just doesn't treat her well at all. He kind of just makes her seem to be this bigot and kind of just makes her seem to be this like really bad person just because of the fact that she has so many deities that she essentially relies on in terms of her power. And he says that he thinks that basically those gods are just going to turn on her and she's an idiot for believing in them, kind of thing. I don't know. He just really rubbed me the wrong way at the very beginning of the story. And I just didn't really get the connection between the two of them. When the real romance actually starts to blossom in the story, I feel like it's very forced. And I felt that it was almost kind of done just so there was a romance. Like, I kind of felt that this didn't need a romance, and I feel like my expectations have been set really high for kind of more gothic, dark literature, especially dark fantasy, because of the Poppy War. And in the Poppy War, there's not really romantic involvements at all. There's like little sparks here and there that the main character gets that some people ship, some people don't. But it's never really solid because that's not the main character's real point of the story. It has like this whole other thing going on that a relationship is like far from her mind. And I would think that the same would be done for Nadia. I thought that Nadia would be really, really against having any kind of relationship because, for one, she was raised in a monastery. They probably taught her a lot about celibacy and things of that nature. And so she probably shouldn't have a lot of these kind of romantic feelings. And two, because of the trauma she has suffered from the Travanians, it would make sense that she was put off by another Travanian, Malachi, and would take a long time for her to build some kind of trust with him. I just felt like it was way too rushed in terms of the trust building and the romance that was between the two of them, and I don't really think that I would have shipped them at all in the first place. One of the other issues I do have with this, though, is I feel like the whole thing between Seraphim and Nadia in terms of some of the powers that they get towards the end of the book is a little confusing in terms of what exactly they're supposed to be, because essentially the both of them, who are essentially on different ends of the spectrum when it comes to the magic wielding within this world. We have Nadia, who is a, worshiper of these gods, that she believes she gets her power from them as a cleric, and she is kind of the vessel that these powers work through. Seraphim is basically a blood mage who thinks that he is the one that controls his powers. He has ultimate control, ultimate ability to use his powers, which he does. So they're on very different ends of the spectrum, but at one point in the story, for both characters, they go through this kind of switch where their power changes and then their usage of that power is different than what they were able to do before. And I feel like that was a little confusing for both people, because Nadia kind of seems to have a moment way earlier in the story, probably about halfway, about 3/4 of the way through the story, where Malachi essentially ties his magic to hers, and I think that's kind of where her switch takes over, because there's a lot of things that she's starting to be able to do that goes against what she had been taught before, and I got that part. But then there's another point later in the story where it kind of just explodes, and it's kind of essentially in the very last battle scene that there really is in the book. There was just a moment that I felt I didn't quite understand in terms of what was happening to Nadia, like with her powers. There is this particular item that she obtains over the course of the story that has a huge influence on something that she's able to do, and I think that was what exactly was making it hard for me to figure out what was happening, because I didn't quite understand how this other item and then this other deity that comes from this item is able to help her. I think that just having a little bit more explanation on that would have been really helpful. And then in terms of Seraphim essentially is the crown prince of Travania. He is basically, his whole goal is to kill off his father, who he thinks is a bad dude, and he thinks that is going to ruin his country with this huge war that's going on. And he has his blood mage ability, but then at one point he does end up actually changing his power in a sense where it's no longer just being a blood mage. He's able to do other things, but I don't know how he's able to do that. I don't know why he's able to do that now. I'm going to assume that this might be something that's going to be extended on in Ruthless Gods. So if you have read Ruthless Gods and know if that whole thing with Seraphim is explained more, please let me know down in the comments below, because I'd really like to be able to understand if that does get explained at all, or if it's kind of just glossed over and never talked about again. Because I think if it's going to be glossed over, I may not be as interested in Ruthless Gods as I would have been, just because I don't like it when authors, and especially in fantasy, do something like this where they change up how a character uses their abilities and doesn't explain how or why this person's able to do it. Like, we didn't even really get much context in terms of what happens to Seraphim when he's able to start using this power. It was just, he got it and then he's able to use it like immediately and knows how to use it. There are also a couple of smaller characters that are involved in this story that I wish would have had a bit of a bigger role, because they seem to have been really important, and I feel like that, I mean, it's entirely possible that in Ruthless Gods they will have a bigger role, but I feel like Praj and Rashid in this story really got the short end of the stick. I feel like we got so much more from Seraphim's friends, Astia and Casper, because they actually had active roles in understanding what was going on Seraphim's end of the story, and I feel like Praj and Rashid almost got nothing. Like, they were there at the very beginning of the story and like they kind of tailed around with the rest of it, and then they were in this big scene at the very end, but they didn't really do anything. Like, I wish that there would have been a lot more done with them, because obviously Praj, you see in the story, does have a really strong connection with Nadia, and Nadia seems to really like her, but we don't really know anything about Praj other than her sister was killed at some point. Regardless, I feel like that the story itself had a lot going for it, because there's a lot of great political building in the story, because we find out have three sides of people in this world, which are people who think on the fact that there are multiple gods that are to be taken into consideration, and they are the ones that distribute the power, and we are just vessels of that power if we are given that power from them. Then there are people that are in Trinavia, where they are more of the idea that these gods are ridiculous, they shouldn't abide by them, and they essentially have powers that they just have, and they can take control of them. Then we have what are called the Vultures, which are basically blood mages that have gone batshit crazy, essentially, and they're like a cult. Like, they're described as a bit of a cult in this world, and they're ruthless, they're torturers, they essentially will take people from the warring country into questioning and torture them essentially to death. And so there's a lot of political intrigue in terms of those three areas of this world. We haven't really gone through a lot of all of it. We kind of focus on mostly Trinavia, as it's where the majority of the story takes place, which kind of makes me upset because I can't count this for my Owls TBR anymore, because none of the story took place in a place that was near a coast or on a coast or at sea. So kind of read this for nothing, but I am actually kind of glad that I did finally read it, because this has been on my TBR essentially since it came out. I don't know, I just feel like with this one I was let down with how not super dark it was. I felt like it was just another fantasy. I felt like it was just another darker based fantasy that dealt with some more blood than I normally would see. Like, I am not really one opposed to blood in terms of literature. When it comes to movie and TV shows, I'm a little more queasy on that. But in literature, for some reason, I'm never really super queasy when it comes to a lot of blood. I think that I held this one too high expectations, especially because I have read The Poppy War, and I feel like that's really set the standard for what I'm looking for when it comes to super, super gory fantasies. And I think that because, for one, this may be YA, that might be a huge part of it. I feel like I was just really let down with the lack of blood and gore. And honestly, this whole thing, let them fear her, this never plays into the story. We don't ever get a point where Nadia is feared of. Like, she never gets that point. Ever. So I don't know why somebody thought it was a good idea to put this on there, other than to bring somebody to the story. Like, there is literally no point to having this on there, because there is no point where Nadia is ever feared by anybody. So to this weekend, I, like I said, have tomorrow off from work. I am taking the holiday off, which is nice. I am, though, tomorrow going to be deep cleaning this entire apartment, because there are some things in this apartment I need to just clean, because if I don't, it's going to make it for a lot harder of a cleaning time when I have to go to move here, which I don't even know if we're going to be able to move now, because we've been told that there's a new stay-at-home initiative thing going on, part of the stay-at-home guidelines, or whatever the hell you even want to call it right now. Basically, our governor said that moving between residencies in the state is not really going to be a good idea. She doesn't want that to happen. But for people who are like students, or they're moving to a long-term area, like for more than 3 months, I think it technically is fine. I just don't know what the realtor that I've been in contact with is going to say about that. I really hope that we'll be able to move in May. I know that the whole stay-at-home thing did get extended to May 1st officially. We've been told that it was going to be extended to April 30th, but it was very unofficial. I don't know if that means I'm going to be able to move. I don't know if that's going to mean that we're going to have to get another month lease on this apartment, but either way, I felt like cleaning tomorrow would be just a really good idea in general, because this place does need it. I need to like clean the kitchen a lot specifically. I really need to clean the bathroom too. Everything else is mostly just tidying up. And I'm going to my parents' house again Saturday, because everyone's still healthy over there, and I need to do laundry again. And we're going over there too to help my mom with moving around and sorting through some stuff in the basement down there for what we're going to throw away from the house, or what exactly like Robert and I are going to take to move, and other stuff like that, because I have stuff down in the basement that's been down there since I graduated from college, so I need to like go through some of it and see what I need to toss, what I can keep, that kind of stuff. I did some digging, and I did find out that Siege and Storm, the second book in the Grishaverse trilogy, I think that's what it's called, by Leigh Bardugo, does count for the Sea and Coast challenge for Defense Against the Dark Arts, because there is a part that is taking place at the sea. So I know my sister has that series, so I think I'm just gonna borrow that book from her when I go see them on Saturday. So that's perfect, because then I can get through The Black Witch. Probably next week I will end up finishing my TBR for Owls. I was gonna try to do it this week, but I don't think that's going to happen with the fact that I did spend 2 days reading Wicked Saints for essentially no reason.
Hey guys, it is I think going on about 1:30 in the afternoon, and I have been a very busy girl today. So today I woke up at about 9:30 or so, and I did my research. I helped my sister with a paper that she was working on for one of her classes. I got my videos up to now essentially on Google Drive and downloaded to my laptop. I worked on a chapter of my book, and so I've spent the last almost 3 hours, I think, cleaning, like deep cleaning my entire apartment. The office I really just straightened up a little bit here and there. It wasn't really that bad, and I vacuumed. I feel very productive. And then after that, I ordered some food to be delivered for a job well done, if I do say so. And then I sat and just finished cleaning my makeup brushes because that had needed to be done like weeks ago, but I haven't worn makeup in like several weeks. So I didn't think about it, and I figured I probably should to try to help with my skin a little bit because it's breaking out pretty bad. Yeah, so I haven't done any reading today yet, but today I will be reading The Black Witch by Lori Forrest. This is a chonker. The book itself is 640 pages, including the acknowledgments, but not including the very tail end of the book that has a sneak peek to the second book in the series. So my plan is for right now is I'm gonna read some of this today, probably get through like a third of it, take another third of it tomorrow, finish the last third of it on Sunday, and then starting up next week, I will end up with 3 books I still have to read for the Owls, which are The End of Oz, Break Your Glass Slippers, and I think Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. Hey guys, so it's about 9:21 in the evening now, and to be completely honest, I haven't really done a whole lot today. I started feeling kind of unwell. Like I started getting a really bad headache this afternoon. I went to take a nap at about 2:30 because I was really tired after having cleaned my entire apartment, and then I woke up around 4 and sat and basically started cataloging some of the books on my bookshelf. Did that for about an hour before I had to stop because my back was hurting still from having cleaned and been bending over and stuff a lot. And then I started getting a headache, and I think it's because there was massive changes in temperatures here the last couple of days, because we had a couple days that was really nice out. It got really cold like yesterday, and then today I think it was supposed to be warmer than it was yesterday, so I think that my head is just kind of going for a loop, and to be honest, it's still kind of hurting. Like I just finished eating dinner thinking that that might help. I also had taken some Tylenol earlier today thinking that would help, and I don't think either is helping at the moment. I was finding that it was getting really hard for me to watch things on my phone or see things on my phone, so I knew that reading was probably not going to be my best option. So I got my laptop and my big weighted blanket that I got for Christmas and came and sat out in the living room for a little while, and then I made dinner around like 8 o'clock because I was getting hungry and I realized I probably should eat because I hadn't eaten since lunch. Tomorrow, I'm not sure when we're going to be heading out to my parents' house. It's probably not going to be till like maybe the afternoon, and we have quite a bit of laundry to do because since I was cleaning, I realized that we needed to like wash a few of our blankets and stuff. Research, writing another chapter of my book, and reading. I think I don't really think I have much else other than maybe cataloging another couple shelves in my bookshelf tomorrow. Hey guys, so it is Sunday night. It is, I think, almost 8:30, and as you can tell, I've showered and I have a face mask on for the next few minutes. I just wanted to quickly come on here to end this vlog because, to be honest, there's not much else going on tonight, and I'm not really feeling my best. I've kind of hit a bit of a downward slope with my overall energy and mental health. This is more so triggered right now with the fact that there's been a lot of changes that have been happening, because essentially I've realized that with the whole stay-at-home thing that's been going on in Michigan, that was extended to April 30th or essentially May 1st, and the fact that a lot of things like travel are essentially being limited, with people not being able to go to other residencies that they have, like if they have a lake house or something like that up north, extends to rental properties. So likely in our situation, while we may technically have the house and have been approved for it, we are not going to be able to fill out any paperwork for it, nor get the keys, nor even be able to move until likely the very beginning of May, provided that we do not end up going into another 2 weeks of quarantine or self-isolation. That's kind of triggered a bit of a downward spiral for me because it's just frustrating in general. I really want to be able to move soon, but I do know that my apartment complex is allowing us to do month-to-month leases. So that's essentially what I'm feeling at the moment, and it's kind of why I haven't really done a lot in the last couple days. I have read about 24 pages of The Black Witch so far. I don't really have much of an opinion on it though. I took a nice hot shower. I am going to finish my facial here and repaint my nails. I have cut down my nails because, to be honest, I had 3 that had broke on Friday after I had cleaned the apartment, so it was probably time for me to cut them anyway. So my plan going into next week is obviously to finish The Black Witch. I also did end up getting Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo for my younger sister, so I have that now to complete my Defense Against the Dark Arts class that I thought I was going to use with Wicked Saints, but that didn't end up happening. So I've got that now, so I will be able to, I think, read that hopefully by the end of this week. It really depends. Obviously, I try to keep a reading schedule as best I can, but it doesn't always end up being that I always stick to that. Robert and I want to do a few things since I'm gonna be having to work from home still for the next couple weeks. We do want to change around some things in like our daily life and trying to change things up a little bit to kind of maybe make my state of mind a little bit better. Maybe going on walks when it's really nice out because the weather here has gotten a lot warmer, and or just doing in general some fitness things because we're both kind of out of shape. Like, I'm fairly skinny, but I am out of shape. Like, I haven't actually gone to a gym in like 3-4 months, I want to say, maybe less than that, but still quite a while. And so I kind of want to get back into doing that and doing kind of like my yoga stuff that I used to do a long time ago, and sitting and meditating again that I haven't done in a long time because I've just gotten out of practice with it. And I think that those are things that are going to help me with trying to recenter myself and help me just to try to remember where I am in my moments and making sure that I do come back to those moments that I'm currently in, because that is my biggest struggle, is I forget where I am a lot of times. I forget those moments that I'm trying to center myself back in on. We also maybe even want to do like a weekly game night, because Robert and I don't really spend a lot of time of doing things other than watching like TV, Netflix, like watching Breaking Bad. Like, we're on to season 2 now, and we're like 3 or 4 episodes, I think, from the end of season 2, but that's basically all we do. And then other times, if we're not doing things together, he's playing video games with his friends, which is totally fine, and I'm just doing my own thing. But we're trying to find ways to do more things together, and we wanted to do like a game night of some sorts, where like either we're playing card games, which we have a couple of, or he helps me with a game that I've been wanting to play for a while, or we sit and play like Mario Party or Mario Kart or something like that on our Switch. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me. If you guys did enjoy this video, please do give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.